We are live.
Yes, we
So
are.
excellent. All right, we'll give it a few moments here. I see people are joining.
Hello, Naida. Long time no see. I was on her live stream last night.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, there's a whole bunch of
Yay!
people. Hello, everyone. Yay.
Kyle joined twice.
Oh, that's fun. Hey, better twice than not at all, right? So,
I know. So
yeah.
did Brandy.
Yes, I know. This is great. Well, welcome everybody. I'm sure we'll have others who join as we go, but I think we'll get started. Yeah, I was just telling Sam and Chris that as I was thinking about today and like a topic, the title I came up with was Parenting, Reparenting, and the People Who Shape Us. And I was hoping that we could have a conversation just around how we relate to one another, how we care for, how we repair in relationship, influence, and grow across generations. So, parenting will come into that, but we also all have been parented in some way, and maybe in some ways have had to reparent ourselves. So, I think we'll have lots of interesting things to chat about. So, let's do a quick intro, and then we'll launch right in. So, who of you would like to go first?
I'll go first this time since I made Sam go
Yay!
first last time. Uh,
Perfect.
yeah, I'm Chris. I'm the face behind the Substack now that I'm still here, which is a company book to the book of the same name, where I write about autism, grief, masking, a whole bunch of different things, as well as uh, finding identity again after different kinds of losses. And yeah, that's me.
I'm Sam Nelson. I am the face behind Neurodivergent Not Broken. I write about a little bit of everything, a lot about social, cultural norms, relationships, parenting, a lot of what we're going to talk about today, like unlearning the stuff that we've all been taught. And let's do this.
All right, sounds great. Well, I'm Heidi Wall Giesbrecht, and I write at Encouragement Along the Journey. And my new recent little side thingy, which is reflections on the sacred and the ordinary, which is not a regular thing. It's just a little whenever I feel like writing something there kind of thing. So I'm a therapist in my paid work, and my newest obsession is Substack, writing, talking with people, and like you, Sam, I've got a wide variety of stuff that I delve into. Um, Generally, anything that interests me, whatever my brain picks up on, I'm like, oh, that sounds cool. I should write about that. So my family's convinced I'm ADHD, but I've done every single free assessment I can find, and they all say I'm not. So I'm like, no, my brain is just really busy. That's all. So, but yeah, so that's me. And we had so much fun together last time that I'm just thrilled we can do it again so quickly. So, yeah. Um, uh, Thinking about today, like, I think what inspired me, Sam, you have like a parent class coming up. And I forget how you described it, but there was something about it that like totally grabbed my brain and went, ooh, this is cool. Can you remind me what you wrote? Because that'll probably twig it for me.
Um, the title was Not Your Typical Parenting
Mm,
Post.
yes.
Um, because I'm realizing that nothing I do is quite typical. Um, and really changing the dynamic
Mm,
from, this dominion over
mm,
children, control over them,
mm,
um, and really focus on their behavior, which is very, common,
yep.
normal, to really focusing on their humanity.
Mm,
Um, it, so I wrote a whole thing about that and was like, okay, now I need to create something else about this, of trying to take all of these things that I have learned and unlearned and
yes.
try to like put it in some sort of package that maybe someone else has an aha moment too.
Mm,
Because a lot of that is just like the water we're swimming in, and it feels so familiar, and we don't really question or challenge it. But it has such a huge impact, you know, on ourselves, you know, because we were all parented, and it has an impact on the next generation too. So I think it's part of the healing work for us individually and for others.
Oh, yeah. And that totally, that was exactly the piece that I had read that I was like, oh, that resonates so deeply because, you know, for myself, like I remember being very young. I'm pegging it at about 7 and having this moment where I thought, if I ever have kids, this is what I'm going to do differently. And I remember it being around, um, like being, oh, did we lose Sam? Hopefully she'll come back. Let me
Yeah, I
see if
think
I
you might
need
need to
to.
re-invite her.
Yes, I am trying to figure out how to do that. Oh, invite guest. Here we go.
Yeah.
All right, we will invite her. So funny. We were just talking about having technical difficulties and falling out of calls. So there we go.
I know.
She will join us again. But yeah, I remember being like probably around 7, and just having the sense of why do I always get told to do things? Like it'd be like, Heidi, go get the jam. Heidi, go do this. Heidi, go do that. And the expectation was I would do it immediately. Now, my parents were very loving and kind, but they raised me the way that they had been raised, which was the parent is in charge of the house and they are going to tell you what to do. And the child does not ask any questions and does not roll their eyes, does not have any kind of reaction to it. The child just has to do what they're told. And I just remember internally, like something within me saying, this isn't right. Like, if I have kids, I'm going to say, Heidi, would you please go get the jam? And when Heidi gets the jam, I would say, thank you so much, Heidi. That was so kind of you to get the jam for me. So yeah, yeah. What does that bring up for you guys?
Does that ever end? Is the first thing
Mm.
that I'm 41, and sometimes it's like, you know, like if I react a certain way, like, dude, I'm not a kid anymore. Like, you're talking to your parent that way. I'm like, you talking to a 41-year-old that way? Like,
Yeah,
so, like,
yeah,
at some point it becomes a little like maybe my parents are still old fashioned in that sense,
yeah.
um, or what? But it's like, and then I like at times I feel more targeted in the
Mm,
sense because I think maybe I'm more because of my background and more fragile. I think they kind of try and step in. Oh, I should say the perceived fragility of my story, um, and so maybe that comes
mm,
uh, into play sometimes. But it does get annoying because then it's like, well, you don't talk to my other siblings this way. Uh,
mm.
like, okay, yeah, I went through some shit, but doesn't mean, or sorry, I went through
It's
some
okay.
stuff.
Yeah,
Uh, it doesn't mean I'm a little kid still. It's like,
yeah,
yes, I'm doing a lot of the work of reclaiming uh,
yeah.
who I was and or who I am and where I'm going. But it it I think there's that expectation of still on one side of their mouth they try and encourage me not to be defined by what happened to me, but at the same time they're defining me by it. I think
Mm.
whether consciously or unconsciously, you know, which is weird.
Yeah,
But
Chris, that's a really good point of like when does it end?
Mm.
Um like I've worked relationally with people like one on one in my regular job as a hairstylist for almost 20 years, and I can definitely see the theme now of, it doesn't matter how old people are, that some of these dynamics with their parents like don't change.
Mm. Yeah.
I get like they're still treated like they were when they were a little kid. And yeah, it's as you said that, I'm realizing how common it is as I think back of all the
Mm.
people that I was like, oh, yeah, they
Yeah.
still think you're, 8 or 14, or,
Yeah.
they don't necessarily trust you or ask for your consent with things, or, yeah. And I think, I can feel that with my own parents to some degree as well, that there's just some dynamics
Mm.
I've done
that
a
are
lot of
still
like
there.
reflect. Yeah, I've done a lot of reflection on this, especially recently, and I think a lot of it has to do with overcompensating on guilt for
Mm.
not seeing, just I mean, both of you know my story, but for those listening, like I went through an extremely abusive
Mhm.
marriage where my autism was weaponized and convinced, was led to believe that the world would be better off without me in it because of my defects, because I'm defective for being autistic, and I hid that, and
Mm.
my and so I think a lot of the a lot of it had to do with the fact that I was ashamed for being, so there was that stigma of, men don't get abused, right?
Mm.
um and so it that's why I kept it quiet. So I think a
Mm.
lot of it is just them feeling guilty for not seeing the signs, uh when all this was happening, and so that maybe that's why they're overcompensating now.
Mm.
But that's
Yeah.
that's me trying to see the
A
best out of.
theory. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I find, I think about situations where, like, as you guys were describing the patterns, and I think, yeah, like we have these family patterns that they become so familiar and they become so normal that we often don't even recognize they're happening. We feel them inside, but we don't necessarily know how to define them. And I remember at one point, like, realizing, oh my goodness, in this certain situation, 16-year-old Heidi shows up. And 16-year-old Heidi was kind of insecure and a little, eye rolly, and I'm like, I am like over 50 and I'm showing up as a 16-year-old. Like, what is the problem here? And so, just kind of processing that and going like, how would Heidi, that has had all these years of experience and learnings and has done so much personal work, how would that Heidi show up in this situation? And I remember the first time that Heidi showed up in the situation, and I was talking with my therapist, and I'm like, and then I said this, and she was like, oh, wow, how did that happen? And I'm like, I have no idea. Like, it just happened. But it was this moment of like, yeah, usually in this situation, like 16-year-old Heidi shows up. And um, one of the books I loved reading early on, kind of as I was figuring out some of this, was The Dance of Anger by Harriet Lerner. And I loved how she talked about the family patterns. And Chris, I hear some of that in your story of like, everyone has their role in the dance. And when we come back to the conversation, we so easily get pulled back into that role. And stepping out of it actually causes great discomfort, both for us and for our family. And all the pressure is come back and do it the way you've always done it. But eventually, if it's like, no, I don't want to participate in that dance anymore. I'm doing a new dance now. They either have to join the new dance or they have to get out of the way. Right? Oh,
If I could heart
I'm
that.
having like a full body reaction to this one.
Yes. Yes, because I've been through it. I've lived through that, and it was terrifying. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. How am I going to hold this boundary with my own parent, right? Like,
Yeah.
as an adult. And I did.
Mm.
And I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but
Yeah.
I knew at that point it was like, either you can respect my boundary or you're not going to. And then that gives me my answer of what I'm going to do next.
Yeah.
And, respecting my boundary, I don't know if that was possible for them.
Yeah.
And so I had to do what I had to do to take care of myself and stay true to like my values, and ended up having to, not participate in that relationship, because it was not going to be like a reciprocal dynamic anymore. So yeah, I can feel that in my body of like, I have two choices. I can either go along with what I've always done and just keep the peace and stay quiet and like not make a big deal about this, or I can speak up for myself and it's going to feel terrifying and things might change because of that. But in that moment, like that was me choosing myself instead of like always choosing everybody else and keeping them comfortable.
Well, that makes me think of Chris's story too, like that sense of choosing yourself, because if you don't, like, I hear choosing life in that, like when we just step in and say, no, I'm not doing this pattern anymore, because this is not, I can't do this. I need to choose to be alive. And the only way to do that is to actually honor what's going on inside of me.
As we're talking, I'm trying to reconcile with, so I kind of had a weird childhood. I grew up overseas most of my life as a kid. So my my parents were always working. And this is gonna make me sound like I grew up wicked wealthy, but I'm that's not the case. So I was often raised by the maids because my parents were always, working. I mean, they were around, but the maids cooked. The maids were there when I got home from school, and but when you live in third world countries, $60,000 a year salary can afford you these things in third world countries. So we didn't like fully live together. Like, I mean, we lived together, but like they were more involved when we moved back to the US. And they were like, even just, I think I could see a lot of like overprotectiveness of just me when I was a kid. Like I had to fight tooth and nail to be like, I want to go sleep over at Will's house this weekend. And so it's like, why can't I? You have your own bed. Why do you need to go over there? And okay, fine, you can go over there, but they would come pick me up at like 6 a.m. I was like, we're just waking up and we're gonna play Mortal Kombat again. Jesus Christ, or Star Fox. That was our other. Man, I am really dating myself. But it wasn't until I got to after I left home where the boundaries were a lot easier to hold, and because it's like, all right, I'm out of here. I like went, I moved away to Oman. I moved away to Switzerland and Madagascar. So it was a lot easier to not be around them and figure things out on my own. And then now, like, I wrote a lot about growing up autistic and masking and things like that. And my parents were like, we had no idea that you struggled so much. And I think part of that has to do with why they're so overprotective now on anything I do, which is weird. So now I'm talking a lot. Sorry.
That's okay. All good.
Yeah.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like as I was listening to you, and I'm thinking of, my own kids who are autistic. They're now young adults, so like 21 to 26. And I think because I had like this unsettledness in myself growing up, and then we had kids, and I realized for the first 3 years, my husband and I thought we had made the worst decision in the world, and we should never have been parents because we clearly weren't cut out to do it. We were struggling. All of our friends seemed to be navigating it. All of the parenting books that we were reading just weren't necessarily working with our kids. And then my supervisor at the time recommended Raising Your Spirited Child by Mary Krasinka. And man, am I ever so thankful that she recommended that book because it it felt like, you know, when you read something and you go, "Oh, this gives words to what I was feeling inside." And it was like it gave words to all of that discomfort in me as a child, and it totally changed how I saw my own kids. And I love things like one of the things I remember was her saying, you know, sometimes we'll describe a child as being stubborn. Um, and she said, stubborn feels so negative. But if you think about it, someone who is stubborn is really just very determined. And then, you know, being determined is actually something that we really value in adults. And someone who, you know, knows their mind and holds to it and isn't swayed by every opinion that comes their way, like, isn't that a really good thing? And so she talks about like nurturing the things in our kids. Um, and you know, I think Chris, when you're talking about masking, it's like, oh yeah, all those wonderful things inside you actually get hidden, and there's not that opportunity to nurture them and like allow them to bloom into existence, right? And so when I think about like shifting the parenting paradigm, I feel
Mhm.
like that whole like how we look at people is so significant. And I don't think that's just parenting. I think that's the world in general. Like if we can look at people and yeah, every strength has its challenges for sure. But that's, you know, I remember like perfectionism being something that I identified in myself growing up. And like, I remember writing a poem about like the double-edged sword of perfectionism, because on the one hand, perfectionism can really hamper you in getting things done, making decisions. But then on the other hand, there's like this amazing beauty that comes with paying attention to detail and being really aware of things. Um, and so I find that perspective piece is so important. Like, how do we view people? And yeah,
I think that's like the core of it too. How do we view people, and how do we categorize people? Like,
Mm.
you know, our society, we're very what's the word I'm looking for? Like adult centric, right?
Yeah,
Like we
yeah,
really don't give a shit about kids as much as we say we do. Like we don't treat them like we actually care about them.
yeah,
And it can be seen as kind of radical for giving kids,
yeah.
like treating kids the way we would want to be treated,
Right.
truly. Like, and when we have all these messages telling us that, you know, we can't trust them and we need to be in charge, and we're getting these messages like from everywhere, right? They're coming
Yeah,
from, you know, religious teachings, they're coming from parenting books, they're coming from our
yeah,
friends. Like, you're the adult, you need to be in control, you have the final say.
yeah,
um it really strips away like children's humanity.
yeah.
And so getting back to that place, like I had a similar moment like you did, Heidi, of like reading the book, which for me was Unconditional Parenting by Alfie Kohn, and
Mm.
being like, oh my God, this makes so much sense. Like, because that's where he was coming from, right? Like humanity.
Yeah,
Like we're seeing kids as people and we're treating them like people. And then it got me thinking, very similar to what, you know, what you're talking about with like, oh, you know, we call someone stubborn and that's seen as negative. And then when you think about it, um, it's like, well, I can't try to extinguish this behavior in my child now to make it more convenient for me, and then expect them to and then be like, oh, but when you're adult, that's a good thing to be determined. I
yeah.
just don't want you determined right now. Like, so once I saw the double standard of that, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Why
Yeah,
would I do that?
yeah. Well, and I think relationally too, like if we do take this approach to interacting with people in a top-down kind of way, um, why do we have the expectation that that's going to change when our ages change, right? Like, if you want to have a good relationship with your kid, it can't happen in adulthood. It has to start in those younger years. And how do you have a good relationship with someone? you respect them, you value them, you listen to them, you see their heart. So why would we not do that across generations, right? Yeah.
So I don't have any kids, and a lot of it uh, what is because of choice. I have a lot of sensory issues around kids, but that doesn't mean I don't like them. I love being around them. It's
Yeah.
just in very small doses. And as you guys are talking about this, I like a specific scene comes to mind, or I should say, before that, like for a long time, that's the reason why I didn't want kids was because of my sensory issues. But more recently, I've thought about it, and it's the sensory issues plus I don't want what got done to me to happen to a future child of mine
Mm.
or a potential child of mine. So that's what.
Yeah.
So that, um, but um, but my interactions with kids, one scene comes to mind. It happened last summer, right after Katie died. It must have been like a week or so uh, after she passed. I had gone with my dog to Anna's. Anna's is a little restaurant that we used to go to eat oysters right on the water. We were sitting outside, and there was this really friendly kid and his family sitting next to me outside, and uh, he first asked if he could pet Shad, and I was like, oh yeah, like ask your parents first, like that's okay, because I don't want, I'm always cautious about, um, but then his parents started talking to me, and the kid's like, why do you sound sad?
Mm.
And that's like, well, someone I cared about just died recently, and I was like very direct with the kid, but in a way that was like very filtered.
Yeah.
And he was just asking me questions, and he was just, his parents were like, that's not polite. And I was like, it's okay, like I don't mind if it's okay, I'll answer.
Yeah.
And that's always been my approach with kids, is like,
Yeah.
tell them the truth, but in a way that
Yeah.
it's kind of like watered down. I
Yeah.
mean, there's one way to tell the truth that will, be heartbreaking, or it could be like a more digestible way.
Yeah.
And
Age
the kid,
appropriate. Yeah.
yeah, and like he got it and everything, and
Yeah.
the kid was like super, you know, uh, sweet afterwards. They were leaving,
Mm.
and the kid's like, I want to give you a hug, and I'm like,
Oh,
I don't do hugs, like I
so
from
sweet.
anyone, like and and before I could say no, like I'm okay, you don't need to give me a hug. He gives me a hug, and I'm like, okay, like,
I guess this is
um,
happening. Yeah.
yeah, and like, so I was glad it was over when it was over, but
Mm.
it felt like that 2 seconds felt like 10 years. But that's always been my approach with
Yeah.
kids, even though I don't have them. It's like, just tell them the truth, and they can handle it.
Mm.
They're more resilient than we.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it, you know has to be someone believing in them,
Yeah.
and fostering that growth.
Yeah.
So like I'm like you, Sam, like that whole thing of, I'm the parent, you have to listen to me, I'm always right. I think that's so like Victorian in thinking. So I don't know.
Yeah.
There's got to be a way we uh do things a little bit differently in the 21st century.
Yeah. Well, and
And this is coming from a non-parent. I'm not a parent.
yeah.
I don't know the nuances of all this, but
No, I think
yeah.
that's beautiful, Chris. Like as you're saying that, there's two things that come to mind. The first for me is just um, how beautifully you navigated that, and just the like kindness and respect and humanity that you approach this kid with. And so even though hugs are super uncomfortable and you didn't really want it, to me that hug signifies you saw me as a human and I see you as a human and I want to acknowledge it. And so like that was just so beautiful. Like I think if every parent could do that for kids, our relationships would change radically. And then the second thing that struck me was just like the genuine non-judgmental curiosity that a lot of kids bring to the table
Yeah.
before they've been tainted by all the stuff around them, right? And it's like that natural curiosity and no judgment, just really wanting to understand. Like, again, if we could just learn from kids, there is such wisdom there, right?
They're going to learn things one way or another, right? And
Yeah.
what better, I always think that if I had kids, I would rather have them learn it from me versus like they're going to learn how to swear. They're going to learn, about sex like way younger than we think we want them to. So like when they ask, just be like, yep, it's going to happen. You're going to have these feelings. Just make sure you protect, like, I'm not going to, you can go great lengths to prevent something from happening. They're gonna find a way. We were all kids once. We found a way, so I mean, and so I have to be careful with that sometimes, especially with now that my little sister has a new baby. I'm gonna have to be careful with that approach because she probably will hate me forever if I approach it the Chris way.
Well, sometimes the Chris way is needed.
Yeah.
As you're saying that, like I'm thinking of the patterns in my family, of the way I was raised, like very conservative, and like those were not topics that we talked about. We were taught right? Like this is what you do and this is what you don't do, but there was no like comprehensive education whatsoever. And that was like unofficially on my list of things to do differently with my kids, of like, we're going to be honest with them, age appropriate, but like, we're going to talk about these things, and this is just what bodies do. This is what, right? Like, again, because you're going to find out one way or another, and I want you to have as good of information as you can. And I don't know where your friend's getting their information, or where else you hear this from. And I remember a couple years ago, my oldest, as we're talking about things as she's getting a little bit older, and I was like, I just want to make sure like we can talk about these things openly and honestly. And she goes, I know, because you didn't have that with your mom and you want to have that with me. And I was like, I do. And if we don't create safe spaces to talk about those topics, right? If we come at it with judgment and punishment and all of these things, like kids aren't going to talk about those things.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a really big pattern that I was like, yep, we're doing this differently for sure.
Mm-hmm. But I think the whole like having conversations that are actually conversations, because you talked about like being told what to do, like being given the rules, rather than like one of my favorite podcasts that I've listened to recently is Whitney of Calling Home, and she had an episode called something like how parenting has changed and why it's not going back. And she talked about kind of the old style of parenting being very rules based, expectation based, obligation, and then the new style of parenting being about relationship and really having like these kinds of conversations. And again, I think like if you want to have the kind of relationship with your adult child where you can go out for coffee and enjoy a conversation, that has to be built earlier on. You can't just expect the switch to flip at some point and it's different if you haven't laid the foundation for it. And so, yeah, I think of just, basic respect both ways, regardless of who you're talking to, regardless of how old they are, how young they are. And that goes for our own kids, it goes for nephews and nieces, it goes for kids that we run into out in the world, because we're gonna run into people that are not all exactly our age all over the place, right? So
Mhm.
just that, yeah.
When
As you're
mine,
talking about the go, Chris, I'll hold this thought. You go.
I was gonna make a dumb joke. I was gonna say when
Do it. Do it.
my brother's kid was learning how to speak,
Yeah.
she used to call me ankle, and I used to call her my knees.
Okay, that's a good one.
Anyway,
That's a really good one.
That is
Um,
hilarious.
I'm really proud of myself because I paid attention to your joke and I'm holding my thought, which is really hard for me
Impressive.
to do. So I'm thinking about like the rules, right? Of like, and how that has changed. And it's reminding me about something I have previously written about of like how we're not taught to question or we're not even allowed to question. But when I was writing about this, I was referencing back to last summer when I was in the car with my kids, and I remember telling them, like, I was thinking of a specific context that they didn't need to know, but I was like, I remember being told to never lie, that lying was wrong, that lying was bad. And I said, I don't believe that anymore. And I was like, I'd be curious when you guys think it would be the right time to lie. When do you think it would be a good time to lie to protect yourself, to protect your own safety? Because, like, sure, that sounds great in theory, but in reality, who is that lying protecting? And they had some really great answers. We talked about like, hey, if there was someone that was making you feel uncomfortable and you're outside playing outside of our house and they're like, do you live here? Do you think that might be a good time to lie? And you could say, I'm just visiting, right? Like, I didn't have those conversations with my parents. There was no nuance about that. And I said, or if they're like, hey, what's your name? And you're like, I don't know them. I shouldn't trust them, right? I was like, so I want everyone to tell me what your alias is going to be if you're ever uncomfortable and you're like, I know I should not trust this person and tell them my name. Yeah, you lie.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's all in context of like, we have so many of these blanket rules.
Yeah, black and white, all or nothing.
Black and white that often protect the adults. And yeah, that was a conversation I never intended to have, and it just happened. And I was like, oh, that was actually really cool.
I always wondered about this with parents. Oh, in the taking the black and white avenue. And sorry, we'll go back to your point, Sam, in a second. But like we want to teach these kids not to lie, but we lie to them from the moment they're born. Case in point, the Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus, what's that other one? The Easter Bunny, right? You lie to them for years, and we expect them to tell us the truth all the time, right?
Ooh, that's an interesting one.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah.
And so why do we do that?
Yeah.
As parents, or as me as an uncle,
As society, yeah.
And then we, and I don't know what I felt like when I found out that none of these things were true, but like, what does that do, just generally speaking, on the credibility issue from child to parent, right? I find that to be hyper important too, right?
Totally.
You need to have credibility with your son or your daughter or your niece or nephew, right? So I don't know.
That's a
it's kind of
super
alluding to your point a little bit, Sam.
Yeah. That's a super interesting one for me, because we Rich and I had a lot of conversations about kids before we ever had kids. And so we like processed a lot of really weird questions. It's how our relationship has always been. We delve into weird questions because he brings them and I'm game to jump in. But one of them was around this, like, are we going to tell our kids about Santa Claus, the Tooth Fairy, the Easter Bunny? What kind of credibility is that going to build up for them? And so we very intentionally chose not to say, this is from Santa Claus, or there's an Easter Bunny, or, whatever. We just didn't use that at all. And it was such a tricky line to walk because, like, if my kids go and say to someone else, there's no Santa Claus, other parents could get mad at us, right? Like that was a very real thing of like, how do you, and so, I mean, we would have these conversations with them from young on about respecting choices that other people made, even if they were different than the choices we made. And so, like, we know that there's no Santa Claus and we haven't talked about Santa Claus with you, but here is where the story comes from. Here is why people say it. And if somebody really, really believes there is a Santa Claus and you say there is no Santa Claus, that could really be hurtful for them. And so, really, just kind of like helping them understand it. But it was a super tough line to walk. But we were like, absolutely no way am I going to lie to my child and then tell my child, I want you to be honest with me. Like, again, it feels like that top down thing, like how it, and I said this yesterday as I was talking about like leadership stuff. Like, I've always thought if I want something from someone, I have to be willing to lead that way first. And so if I want my kids to be able to be honest with me, or if I want my clients, because I don't work with kids, but I have some kid clients. So if I want my kid clients to be honest with me and um, to be respectful and responsive, I also need to be respectful and responsive and be upfront with them. And so, using that with my kids, but it's a tough one because again, it feels like one of these places where I I was out of sync. And Sam, I think you alluded to that right at the beginning of like approaching parenting with this paradigm is kind of, I hope it's becoming less countercultural, but it feels countercultural when you're in the
Mhm.
midst of it.
Mhm.
And approaching, I think, relationships in general this way can often feel countercultural. And I mean, I have some suspicions around that some of the patriarchal pieces really
Yes,
impact it significantly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That as you're telling that story, it's making me think of when I was probably like 6 or 7, maybe. I was with a friend and their mom, and I remember saying that the Easter Bunny wasn't real. And I remember the mom being so upset. And I was like, "What? It's not real." Having never had that conversation that
Yeah.
you're talking about having with your kids, that like, hey, other people might believe in this. That's okay. We don't have to, rain on their parade. But like, I was like, oh, I forgot that happened. Um, but but eh, as you continue talking, it made me think of the like, you know, the modeling piece of this, right? Like if I'm expecting you to do this, like I have to be willing to do it too.
Mm.
Um, and I think about this and I talk about this a lot with like apologizing and holding ourselves accountable,
Mm.
where like we expect kids to to do that. But especially, if we are a parent and they are with us a good amount of the time, we cannot expect that from them if we don't model what it looks like to take accountability, what it looks like to apologize, what it looks like to make repair. And I'm to the same point of, I know there's this pattern of people that their relationships with their parents, some things don't change as they get older. Um, that is one of those patterns that I have also noticed, is that
Mm.
those some people's parents have never ever apologized to them once in their entire
Mm.
life. Um,
Mm.
and yeah, really made me think, how is my kid supposed to learn how to do this if I
Mm.
don't show them? If I don't say, hey, I messed up. I
Yeah.
shouldn't have done that. You told me not to do it and I did it.
Yeah.
How can I fix it? I'm sorry, right? Like, I cannot expect them to do something that I'm
Yeah.
not willing to do myself.
Yeah. Man, I'm working on a Father's Day post, and my dad passed away. Oh, what are we at? Almost 30 years ago now, and he had cancer. Was diagnosed late October and was gone by just after Easter. So very, very quick.
Yeah, quick.
Yeah, and in the meantime, my mom, as caregiver, got sick and ended up in the hospital with a kidney infection that almost killed her. So she was in the
Oh, shit.
hospital over Christmas. And so it was super intense. So during that time, my mom was in hospital. My dad couldn't drive anymore. And so we were driving him to the hospital and back every day. And we had one evening where we pulled into the driveway and we were going to drop him off. And he just wouldn't leave the car. And he just kept talking and talking and talking. And um, it was the one time where he acknowledged and apologized. And it was this really significant moment because I'd always been like, the rule following kid. I did everything that I was told to do. I really tried to do things perfectly, but always still felt like it wasn't enough. And he said something along the lines of, like, you were a really good kid and we were really hard on you. And I was like, wow, like, and that was the only conversation we ever had around that, but to this day, when I think about it, it's still like it was so significant, and I think there is something really significant, uh, not just as parents, I mean, about really acknowledging something for someone else, and I think as a society, we are not very good at apologizing. We think that apologizing and repair looks like, "Oh, I'm sorry you feel that way," and then we move on and forget about it, and it's like, the words "I'm sorry" are probably the least of it, right? Like, if we can acknowledge your perspective, we can acknowledge what we've heard, what we've understood, how we see that you've been hurt or harmed, and then own the part that we can own and acknowledge it, and then figure out how to move forward. Like with our kids, we never said you have to apologize, you have to go say sorry. And again, we got such pushback from other adults who were like, you have to make your child go say sorry. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's not how we parent. We're not going to do it.
No.
But we would talk with our kids and say, hey, like, do you know what just happened there? What do you think was going on for that other child? What do you think they might have felt? And once they really got it and went, oh, yeah. So that feels like when this happened to me. Yes. And then, then we would say, okay, so what do you think you need to do to repair this? And I mean, sometimes their suggestion would seem really silly. It'd be like, I should give them a lollipop. And but it was like, every part of me wanted to quash that and say, oh, no, that's not good enough. And then I'm like, no, but wait, it's coming from their heart.
Yes.
And so it was like, well, why don't you go try that and see, and then ask them and say, is there anything more I can do? Or is there anything more you need? And really kind of like teaching and modeling that repair work rather than just, you go say you're sorry. Sorry, right? It's like, who
Like,
wants
who is
that?
it for? And who is it for? Who is it
Right.
for? Right? Is this just to check the box, or like, like, once I learned about the terms like intrinsic and extrinsic motivation, it really made me think, like, in a situation like that, am I making my kid apologize because I want them to apologize to make me feel better? That's I can't say it, extrinsic.
Yeah.
I want them to apologize intrinsically because,
Yeah.
right? Because they actually want to and they mean it. And if you don't mean it, then I actually really don't think you should be apologizing, because then you kind of are lying.
Yeah. Well, but I think you're getting like totally to the crux of the matter here when it comes to, like, is this about behavior and about modifying behavior and getting correct behavior? Or is it about the heart? Is it about what's going on inside? And like, for us thinking about kids, I kept saying, I obviously I want them to look decent and behave well, but I would rather have bad looking behavior and their heart intact than to have perfect behavior and be hiding all sorts of shit underneath, right? Like, yeah, but I think as a society, we often are very behavior focused. We want things to look the right way. We want you to do things in a certain way so that it seems appropriate rather than actually being willing to do the more complex work of understanding what's going on underneath, which it's a whole lot harder. And parenting this way is a whole lot harder. Having relationships this way requires a whole lot more effort. Interacting with people in this way, I think, takes a lot, and it is so worth it.
Two
I'm
things
waiting to
come
hear
to
what
mind.
Chris has to say.
Yeah. No, two things come to mind for me. You know, when you were talking about that parent, Heidi, that was telling you like you have to make your kid go say sorry, right? I went to a little farmer's market with Shadow in Baltimore City when we lived there. It was at Patterson Park. And Shadow was younger. She was like 3 or 4. And I had, I used to walk her with a choke collar, um, the ones you see that look really mean. Um, but I had some guy come up to me and say, that's dog abuse, what you have on, right? And I put in a lot of work with Shadow. I had my friend help me train my dog, and um, I had to tell him like, I can see why you say that, but this is the tool that works, that my dog responds to best, right? And it was, I've tried all these other ways of adapting her behavior so she wouldn't jump or lunge at other dogs or things like that, and this worked. Now, if you see any picture I post with Shadow, she's always off the leash. It was the thing that got me to control her and have her listen on how to identify behavior or correct behavior and what good behavior looks like, right? So it kind of reminds me of that. Like there is no one size fits all solution or one way of doing things societally. You have to find what works for, in my case, my dog, right? But I think I bring this up because back when I was married, my ex-wife's grandpa had a phenomenal sense of humor. He raised 12 kids. And I said, "How'd you do it?" And he said, "1 second." And he came back with a book that said, it was titled How to Train Your Lab, right? And he said, "This is how I did it." And so like, I think there are a lot of like, I'm not saying that kids are dogs, but there's just a lot of similarities in terms of structure and consistency that are akin to raising a kid and raising a dog. Kids are a lot more complex, but that's so that's one thing. Like there's no one right way to parent. You got to find, I think, what suits you for your specific kid, because we're all snowflakes, right? We all are a little different.
Yeah.
Second, on the whole thing on like just apology in general, like either parents apologizing to any their children for anything, that's, or just getting an apology in general as adults is just so rare these days. And like, why do we do it? We do it for closure. And that's something I recently explored too, is like, how do we get closure? How do we get closure from things that hurt us? And we get sold this whole entire idea of what closure looks like. It's saying you're sorry. It's the person who hurt you coming and saying, I did this, I did this, I did that, and this is how it hurt you. I don't need you to tell me what you did and what it did to me, right? I know that. And it just getting that is so rare. And so I don't know why we sell that societally, that's what closure is. And we have to be thankful for those kinds of opportunities like you had with your dad, Heidi, that he
Mm.
apologized. And
Yeah.
but oftentimes it's us finding that closure. We have to find that closure within ourselves of like,
Hmm.
if we don't get that apology, then like how do we, for a lack of a better term, get over it or move
Yeah.
past it in
Yeah.
a healthy way?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big lesson for me the last couple years,
Mm.
with my parent, of not getting that, and really having to do the work of trying to once I wasn't so close to it, right? Once I had a little time and space to be like, okay, I could see all the reasons why he would not do this. I don't like those reasons, but I can understand them. Um, and then the other half of it is like learning to be okay
Mm.
myself when I didn't get that. And then it really, I mean, it's sad, but it kind of shows you how invested people are in a relationship, and whether you have that mutual respect or not. Can when you mess up, can you apologize? And then I was like,
Yeah.
actually, it was a clarity for me of like, if this thing happens and you can't hold yourself accountable, right? And again, it's not the sorry, that's not the words you're looking for, but I was like, maybe this isn't a relationship that I want to be in.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
um
Yeah.
like, why, like, and that's going to be different for everyone.
Yeah.
But it's really hard to come to terms with, especially with a parent, right? Like, of all people, because there can be so much harm done there, and it doesn't have to be intentional. No one
Yeah.
has to be malicious. No one has to, right? Like, I want to harm you, but it
Right.
happens. And if
Right.
we can't acknowledge that happens,
Yeah.
and believe people when they're telling us that it
Yeah.
happens, like that is harmful in a different kind of way.
Yeah. Well, and I think, the whole area of apologizing, it requires us to be able to do the work of looking inside without being threatened. And like, apologizing isn't saying, I suck, I did everything wrong, I intentionally harmed you, just like you said, Sam. But it is about being able to hear, what was the impact of this on the other person, and identifying what that would feel like for them. And I always talk about like perspective, and I'll hold up like my phone in session and I'll say, like, if you're looking at this side and I'm looking at this side, we can argue till we're blue in the face and we're never going to
Mhm.
agree that it looks the same. And so, like, when it comes to apologies, just recognizing that, like, what may have felt like no big deal to me may have been deeply harmful to
Yes.
someone else.
Yes.
And so I can't just take it from my perspective and say, so therefore it didn't matter. I'm sorry, whatever. You're just making a big deal out of it. But to acknowledge that, okay, what I'm hearing is that when this happened or when I did this, this is what happened inside of you and this is what it felt like. And honestly, that is heartbreaking to hear. Like, there is no part of me that would ever want you to have to experience
Mhm.
that. And I want to acknowledge that, yes, I know I didn't intend it to be that way, but what I did really harmed you. And,
Yes.
like, that is an apology rather than, well, I'm sorry you feel that way.
Yes. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting, Chris, because when you said like closure, and I thought, yeah, first of all, I think the whole process of like forgiveness, of like freeing ourselves from the weight of the thing that happened, is so much harder to do when the other person hasn't acknowledged it. But there is that process, not of forgiving them, but of freeing us from having to carry that burden. And I think that is so much, it's easier done when both people are part of the process. But the apology at that point is only the beginning of the process, right? And I think you're right. As society, we see it as the end of the process. And it's like, oh, no, 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 no. If
Mhm.
we're doing this well, the acknowledgement and the apology is the beginning of the process that now leads to repair and continued growth. and continued relationship. Yeah.
I think in most cases, right, parents don't intend to harm us, right?
Mhm.
But it happens.
Yeah.
I think we do it too,
Yeah.
to people we care about.
Yeah.
Uh, so, but I'm in thinking through my story of like my parents have asked for a lot of forgiveness for not seeing what I went through and things like that, and I'm like, it's not really your burden to carry, because
Yeah.
but what I went through was intentional and
Mm.
malicious,
Yeah.
focused on me erasing myself from the world. So what, like, in those instances, no amount of apology will ever change the
No.
way I feel, right? Like, you could apologize till you die.
Mm.
And like, I'm never gonna
Yeah.
see it as a real apology,
Yeah.
or and it's something that I have to carry. It has a lot of impact on how I see other people, especially from a romantic standpoint of,
Mm.
now I have two polar ends of the spectrum. I have one that was focused on entirely on abuse and psychological warfare, and one that was really, really, really good. There were, typical relational issues, but
Yeah.
she died,
Yeah.
and so now I have to grapple with both ends of the spectrum, and they're
Yeah.
both fresh,
Yeah.
and like, but in and that hurt, and maybe one day her dying hurt, and uh but anyway, all that is to say, like, there are just some wounds
Mm.
that
They're deep.
cannot be forgiven, no matter how much they apologize, because the intent behind it was so malicious and
Mm.
nefarious.
Yeah.
Whereas what we're talking about here, in terms of, like, now, if you had a parent that actively did things and abused you and stuff like that, and they apologize, like, that, but most of the, that's what, like, one in 100 cases, right? But majority of parents don't actively want to damage their kids. They do it
Yeah.
anyway, though, right?
Yeah.
And I forget what point I was trying to make, but maybe it is just that,
Yeah.
you know, and maybe they don't, and maybe in their lack of not really understanding what they did to you, that maybe they won't apologize. Maybe you will get that weird, I
Yeah.
didn't think it was a big deal kind of a thing.
Well, and I think that's when it's hardest to like work through the part that we can do, right? Because like when I think of forgiveness, again, I don't think it's actually about the other person. I think it's about us. And it's that, like, how do I not let this, and Chris, you've touched on this a little, how do I not let this define me? How do I move forward in life and not let the weight of it constantly pull me back?
Hmm.
And to me, that is like the process of forgiveness, is like, how do you free yourself from that? Um, and yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like, if the other person isn't, even if, let's say, someone has harmed you deeply, and let's say they do genuinely acknowledge where they came from and what they did and how they harmed you, that doesn't mean you have to go on to have a relationship with them, right? But that is still where, we make those decisions of, okay, I may actually believe that you are genuine in what you are saying, and I still don't feel like I can be in a relationship with you because you are still not a safe person for me. I don't think those things are mutually exclusive. So I think you've pointed out something really important there. Um, that it's a process that is complex, like so much in life, right? And looks different from situation to situation.
And I don't know why this example just came to my mind, but I think Heidi, I turned you onto the show Shrinking. Right?
Yes.
Yeah, I love that show.
So good.
Yeah.
And like, I think in that show, the main character's wife got killed in a drunk driving accident, right?
Yeah.
And at one point in the whole series, both the guy and the guy's daughter, who lost their mom and wife, come into contact with the guy who killed the wife and took them away. And you see that kind of them working through that kind of wound of, hey, you took my mom, you took
Yeah.
my wife, and then they eventually become close.
Mhm.
And they work through that kind of forgiveness, and so it is possible, I think.
Yeah.
I think yes, that's a sensationalized TV thing, but in a more concrete real life example, there's this when I did a couple projects in Mali, there's this story of uh, whenever someone kills, whenever murder is committed, um, the their form of justice is they tie the murderer to a chair and throw them in the Niger River, and it's and the family of the victim's family has the option to say nothing or say something, like,
Mhm.
and if they say something in terms of, like, we forgive this guy, they rescue the person and the guy doesn't drown. And they say that the families that do that end up having a higher sense of peace, because they no longer have to carry that
Mhm.
with them, versus what you see with the people that let the murderer drown. They are far more depressed and far more angry
Mhm.
throughout their course of their
Mhm.
life. So
Mhm.
like it is possible to kind of like work through that level of
Yeah.
forgiveness, no matter the wound, but it's just very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. And I genuinely believe, and I mean, I've experienced it myself, that when the other party does not take ownership, the work for the wounded person is so much more difficult. Um, and so, when if we are the person who has wounded someone, whether intentionally or unintentionally, if we do our work and are able to acknowledge it, we actually help the other person's journey. But yeah, I mean, it comes back to like the whole thing we started with, right? That this isn't just a conversation about having kids. It's about how we relate, how we care, how we repair, how we influence and grow across generations, and across relationships. Um, gosh, there's been so much good stuff here. I love these conversations with you guys. Um, Yeah, I'm realizing it's, after 12 and we probably should wind things
Oh yeah.
down. I know it goes so quickly. We'll have to do it again. But yeah, closing thoughts. Any things you want to kind of highlight or leave people with? And maybe Sam, you can also tell people a bit about your group coming up.
Hmm. I'll start with that so I don't forget. I May 24th. Yes. Not next Sunday, but the Sunday after. May 24th. I am running my workshop for the not your typical parenting workshop based off of my not your typical parenting post. We're going to kind of go over actually a lot of things that we talked about here. And that is free, but there's limited spots. So you go to my Substack and find that in that post. And the thing I think I would want to leave people with is number one, that it's like it's so easy just to do what's familiar. It's so easy to do what's familiar, and we don't really think about it. It's a lot harder to do, what you're intentional about and what's new and different and not familiar. But I will say from personal experience, like like anything, the more you do it, the easier it becomes and the more familiar it becomes. And I have seen the payoff with my kids of interacting with them in this relational way versus the hierarchy of the mutual respect we have for each other. And it's been absolutely worth it to treat them with the same respect and understanding that I would want for myself.
Awesome. Thanks. Yeah. What about for you, Chris?
I think I will leave it with what Plato once wrote. He said something along the lines of, be kind to everyone. You don't know what the journey the other person is going through. And that can apply to even your kids or your parents. Like my parents didn't know I was autistic, and the challenge that the challenges that came with that, or they didn't know the severity of the abuse I went through. And I was their kid. So I think irrespective of the relationship that you have with someone else, just look at them as human and just be kind to them.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I think as I was thinking, just as you guys were talking, I noted some things down. One of the first thing that comes to mind for me is how easily we as humans get defensive. And, as we've been talking about this, and even just what you shared, Chris, of like, think about what the other person is going through. If someone brings a hurt to us, if we can not see it as about us, but actually see it as about them, I think it's a way that we can allow ourselves to show up, not defensively, but genuinely wanting to understand what's going on for them. And we use 3 words in our family when we talk about healthy relationship, and we talk about mutual, equal, and connected. So it's not just about one person. We're all equal. It's mutual. It goes both ways, and it's about building that connection. And our mantra has always been we want to have their hearts. And so I would say, as whatever relationships you are bringing to mind as you're listening to our conversation, to think about that, being willing to see who the other person is and to see their heart. Will probably be a pretty good jumping off point. So yeah, thank you guys so much for being willing to jump on. And it was very last minute. We literally decided this last night. So I'm thrilled that it worked. Yeah.
Me too.
Thanks for having us. I'm excited to go back and
I was
watch
super
it.
nervous, actually.
Were you?
Yeah,
Oh,
because I was like, oh man, how am I gonna contribute to this conversation if I don't have any kids? But yeah.
oh, I knew you had good wisdom to contribute, Chris, and you did not disappoint. So
Nope, and
I
we
wouldn't
were all
necessarily
kids
call-
once.
Yeah,
and we were all
that's
kids
true.
once, and we all we were all parented. So
Mhm.
yeah, awesome. Well, have a wonderful weekend, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
All right, take it easy.
Bye.